They slapped Elon Musk with a $3.2 million fine, figuring he'd just cough up the cash and keep it moving. But what he pulled off in that courtroom, it left even the judge totally floored. It was supposed to be a chill morning in courtroom 7B at the federal courthouse in Fresno, California. Rain was softly hitting the windows. The clerk was flipping through papers, and reporters were slouched in their seats, tweaking their cameras and sipping coffee from those flimsy paper cups. Then the door swung open, and Elon Musk strolled in solo. No security crew, no pack of lawyers, just him in a gray suit, dark tie, and a face that gave nothing away. People looked up, kind of curious but not blown away. After all, Musk had been called in for supposedly breaking court rules from an earlier hearing tied to one of his companies. The court's beef? He'd let slip some hush-hush details during a press thing a few weeks back. It seemed like a straight-up slip-up, or so they thought. Judge Deirdre Colton was running the show that morning, sharp as ever, no patience for nonsense, especially with big shots like him. She glanced up from the bench, locked eyes with Musk for a quick second, then went right back to her notes. "Elon Musk," she started, her tone steady but solid. "You've been found in violation of federal court orders about sealed testimony. The fine's $3.2 million, due in 14 days. No one gasped. No big dramatic moment. Come on, it's Elon Musk, billionaire CEO, spotlight chaser. A few $1,000,000, pocket change for him. But the way he just stood there, hands relaxed, no pushback, no vibe at all, it made the room feel a little off. Judge Colton leaned in a bit, maybe waiting for him to say something. "Do you get the terms of this ruling?" she asked. "I do," Musk answered, voice flat, "but I'd like to say something now." Heads turned. A couple reporters sat up straighter. The guy didn't even bring a lawyer, and now he's stepping up to talk for himself in front of a federal judge? Judge Colton gave him a side-eye. "Mr. Musk, I'd suggest getting a lawyer before you go on." "With respect, Your Honor," he shot back, "I think it's better if I handle this myself." She nodded slowly. "Go ahead." And that's when things took a turn. Musk reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, neatly folded, no fancy binder or anything. He set it down on the table in front of him. "I'm not arguing about what I said in public," he kicked off, "but I am questioning if that gag order even applied the way they're saying it did." Eyebrows went up. "A tricky legal spot?" He kept going. "The order they're pinning on me comes from Section 35B of the Protective Hearing Rules, set back on March 11th. But if you check subsection 35B-3, there's a public safety clause that lets you share stuff under federal fair use rules, especially if it's about risks that could hit stockholders." Judge Colton blinked. Reporters started tapping away at their keyboards. "I only brought up one part of a manufacturing process," Musk said. "Something that, if people got it wrong, could have been risky for users. I didn't drop names, didn't pull from secret files, just shared my own worries from what I'd seen myself." The courtroom got real quiet. Behind him, a paralegal leaned over to mumble something to another staffer. Even the bailiff, who'd been chilling by the door, looked a little thrown. Judge Colton raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying you're covered under federal whistleblower laws?" "I'm saying," Musk replied, "this fine they're throwing at me might not line up with a case like Stansfield v. U.S. Tech Holdings 9th Circuit 2004. That ruling said execs can speak out for the public good without getting hit by sealed order penalties, as long as it's outside the gag's original scope. He had a specific case, a date, a ruling. Nothing flashy, just straight up calculated. Everyone in the room could feel it now. But Judge Colton, she wasn't a fan of curveballs in her courtroom, and Elon Musk had just flipped the whole game. She didn't say anything at first, just leaned back, fingertips touching, staring at the guy who'd thrown out circuit law like he was born for this. For a minute, the only sounds were the hum of the lights overhead and the random clack of laptop keys from the reporters. "Elon," she finally said, dropping the formal vibe for the first time, "you know quoting old cases in here doesn't automatically get you off the hook. This isn't a debate club, it's a federal penalty." Musk didn't budge. "I get that, but it's not just talk if the penalty's ignoring its own rules." It wasn't just what he said, it was the way he said it. Calm, steady, like he'd gone over it 100 times in his head, but not rehearsed in some fake way. It came from a place of pure confidence, not cockiness, not smooth talk, just straight up clarity. The vibe in the courtroom had totally shifted. Judge Colton wasn't just talking down to some guy in trouble anymore. She was going back and forth with someone who might actually have a grip on this stuff. A reporter in the back muttered, "Why didn't he bring his lawyers?" Another one leaned over and whispered, "Guess he wanted to keep it real personal." And maybe he did, because by now, it sure felt personal. "Mr. Musk," Colton said, switching back to her official tone, "are you asking for a full motion to toss this fine out?" "No, Your Honor," he replied. "I'm asking for a second look based on Statute 1287F, Provision 4. I think this penalty goes beyond what that rule allows when the info shared isn't specific and was meant to flag some big shareholder worries." He took a beat, then added, "I can point to other cases that back this up." Judge Colton let out a little breath. "You're for real about this?" "Wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't," he said. "Something about it threw you off. Not rude, never that, just weird. Like watching someone break down a rule book for a game they weren't even supposed to know, let alone play this well." She waved at the clerk. "Grab me the transcript from the March 11th hearing and get the full Stansfield v. U.S. Tech Holdings ruling on my desk by this afternoon." The clerk got up and bolted down the hall, leaving the room super quiet all of a sudden. "Elon," she said again, this time like a teacher trying to figure out a kid's reasoning. "You get what's on the line here, right? You're not just poking at a fine. You're testing how far a courtroom can stretch its own rules." He nodded. "Yeah, but respectfully, Your Honor, if a court can slap endless fines on stuff that doesn't even fit the gag order's exact words, then where's the line? How does that stop?" Some guy from the Securities and Exchange Commission sitting behind Musk jotted something on a legal pad. Another lawyer from a rival company sneaky-like pulled out his phone and started texting under the table. This wasn't just a basic contempt hearing anymore. It had turned into something bigger, a real turning point. The kind of thing law students would dig into years later, when a guy didn't lean on lawyers or big speeches, but just straight logic. Musk stepped over to the side table, grabbed a printed copy of the March 11th order, something he'd brought himself, and handed it to the judge. "Pages 3 and 4, he said. "Third paragraph. You'll see the exception clause." Colton took it without looking up, her eyes scanning fast, lips tightening into a thin line. "This court's got leeway," she said. "But even leeway," Musk cut in, "has its limits." Nobody said a word. Then, slow as anything, she looked up, not mad, not even annoyed, just with this vibe like something clicked. She didn't ditch the fine right then, but you could tell the rock-solid confidence behind it had started to wobble. If Elon had cracked open a weak spot, the real challenge was still ahead. How far could he push it? By the time they came back from lunch, word had gotten out. Local reporters were already tossing bits of Musk's solo act onto Twitter. Big national news crews started crowding the hallway outside 7B, with cameras, legal talking heads, and random folks who'd never cared about court rules suddenly asking, "Can Elon actually pull this off?" Inside, it was quieter, but tense, like everyone was waiting for him to trip up, to mess up somehow, to show he was just another tech dude faking it in a courtroom. But he didn't mess up. Musk sat at the same plain desk, hands folded, face blank. He didn't check his phone, didn't glance around, just waited. Judge Colton walked back in, holding a yellow legal pad scribbled with notes. She didn't sit down right away. "I read Stansfield twice," she said, "and I checked subsection 35B of the gag order. You were right about that exception clause." A little buzz rippled through the gallery, but she kept going, holding up the copy he'd given her. "That exception only kicks in when the info shared deals with direct consumer safety risks, not just guesses. What you said at that press event hinted at a possible issue, not a sure thing." He nodded. "Fair point, but the wording doesn't say it has to be a sure thing. It says it's about good faith. That's a legal line, and the court can't punish good faith moves that fit that setup, even if the worry ends up being no big deal or overblown." She just stared at him, taking it all in. "You're playing a risky game here, Mr. Musk. I've handled trickier ones," he shot back. A couple folks in the back row let out a quiet laugh, and even Judge Colton cracked the tiniest smile, but only for a second. "I also checked your timeline," she said, settling back at the bench, "and you made those comments just 2 hours after the hearing. That timing makes it look like you spoke before getting the full written order. Are you saying you didn't know the exact rules?" Musk shook his head. "No, I had access, but the oral rundown at the hearing was fuzzy. The clerk didn't email the full transcript till 6 hours later. By then, the press already had my words." The room went silent again. Judge Colton leaned forward. So you're telling me you own the timing but not the reason behind it? Exactly, he said. I was trying to tip off shareholders about a trend I thought could turn into a long-term problem. It wasn't about showing off or grabbing attention. Plus, the stuff I mentioned, it came from our own internal reviews, not some secret files. That makes it my call. A young lawyer in the gallery whispered to her buddy, "He's picking apart every little piece." Her friend whispered back, "Yeah, and it's actually sticking together." Colton flipped through her notes, then looked up. "You know," she said, "this court doesn't usually let regular folks school it." Musk didn't miss a beat. "Then maybe it's time for a quick checkup on that habit." It was straight up bold, but not cocky. His tone wasn't about winning a fight. It was about sticking to what he thought was right. For a few seconds, the courtroom just sat there, not stuck, just kind of thrown off, like nobody wanted to admit they'd been caught off guard. The judge spoke again, slower this time. "You're making this court dig into old rules it hasn't touched in years." "I'm just asking it to play by its own game," he said. Colton tapped her pen on the desk, once, twice. "I'll think it over. We'll meet back here in 24 hours for the final call. No talking to the press till then, got it?" "Got it," he said. She stood, scooped up her files, and walked out without another word. Elon hung back for a sec, then grabbed his paper and left. Calm, not acting like he'd won or lost, just like a guy who'd said his piece. But when he hit the hallway and saw the swarm of reporters waiting, it was obvious. This wasn't just a courtroom thing anymore. It was about to blow up nationwide. Next morning, the gallery was packed before the doors even swung open. Reporters showed up 2 hours early, clutching mics and cords like they were gearing up for battle, eyeing the parking lot for any sign of the guy everyone was talking about. Some folks even drove in from nearby towns just to see it go down. No empty seats left. Even Judge Colton's bailiff had to tell people, "Hey, this is a federal hearing, not a blockbuster flick." Still, you couldn't shake the feeling that something wild was unfolding. Musk walked in quiet again, rocking almost the same outfit as the day before, same suit, same blank look, but something about him felt different. He wasn't just the rich dude anymore. He was the guy who strolled into a courtroom and, with nothing but logic and chill, made a federal judge second-guess herself. The lawyer crew behind the prosecution table had grown overnight. Now there were three, two from the original squad, plus a new face from the special counsel's office. That alone said a lot. At 10:02 a.m., Judge Colton stepped in and got the room under control. "I've gone over everything from yesterday," she started, "and I talked it out with some legal advisors from the district." That hit the room heavy. Judges don't pull in backup unless something messy's come up. Elon Musk's actions, she went on, did go against the vibe of courtroom rules, especially about keeping things under wraps. But the penalty we first threw out might have stretched past what Section 35B actually allows. A pause, some low chatter. She looked at Musk. "Your take on that exception clause, plus the Stansfield case you brought up, was spot on. This court doesn't usually back off its own fines, but I'm dropping it from $3.2 million to a symbolic $25,000. That covers the slip-up and the solid point you made to balance it." Nobody cheered, but a wave of surprise rolled through. Elon didn't grin or nod, just said a quiet, "Thank you, Your Honor." The judge wasn't done. "Let's get one thing straight. This court isn't cutting you slack because you're loaded or famous. You got this rethink," Judge Colton said, "because you showed up ready, respectful, and on point. That's rare, and it counts." A lady sitting behind Musk leaned over to her husband and whispered, "I figured he'd be all full of himself, but nah, he's just different." The judge snapped her binder shut. "Court's done for now." Folks got up, reporters bolted for the door to get their stories out, but Musk hung back a sec, watching the judge head out. Then he turned, walked past the quiet gallery, and slipped out the same way he came in. Outside, though, the world was already spinning its own take. Headlines popped up fast. "Elon Musk takes on court fine, comes out ahead. Judge rethinks ruling after Musk's solo stand. One guy, no lawyers, tons of legal smarts." People started arguing. Was this some brilliant legal move or just another rich dude bending the rules? Did it prove courts can flex if you've got clout, or that straight-up truth can still shake even the toughest setups? Some thought Musk planned it all, putting on a big show to win folks over. Others figured he was cool with losing and just spoke up because it felt right. But one thing nobody could argue. Everyone saw it happen, not in a news blurb or a tweet, but right there, live. A guy stepped into a courtroom, pushed back on the system trying to pin him, and got it to budge, not with cash or pressure, but with words. Still, as the buzz outside got louder, the real chaos hadn't even kicked off yet. The public had questions now, and the system wasn't ready to answer them. That afternoon, Judge Deirdre Colton sat alone in her office, a cold coffee mug in front of her, and a legal pad covered in notes she never thought she'd write. Her clerk had stepped out, and her phone was blowing up with missed calls, old law school buddies, reporters she hadn't talked to in forever. She stared at the door for a bit, then flipped back to her notepad. There, in her own writing, were 5 underlined words. He wasn't wrong, not totally. Colton was no stranger to big cases, 26 years on the bench, dealing with shady business busts, lawsuits against drug companies, and civil rights fights that hit the national radar. But she'd never run into anyone like Musk, someone who walked in, kept it simple, and took apart a multi-million-dollar fine with nothing but a few old legal references. What bugged her wasn't just cutting the fine, it was that he made her see the court might have overstepped. She pulled up the ruling again, Section 35B, Exception Clause, Whistleblower Intent. There it was, clear as day, tucked on page 4, right where he said. She scribbled in the margin, "How did we miss this?" A knock broke her focus. Her clerk popped in with a thin folder. "Judge," he said, "legal oversight's on the line. They want a rundown on the Musk tweak by Friday. Oh, and Channel 12's asking for a comment." She waved off the press bit quick. "No interviews." He hung there a second. "There's more. Law students from UCDAVIS are passing around the transcript. Professors are using it for ethics talks. It's turning into a whole deal." She raised an eyebrow. "A deal?" He nodded, kinda unsure. "Yeah, they're calling it the Fresno defense. Like when someone flips a courtroom with its own rules." Colton almost cracked a smile, but didn't. "Close the door," she said soft as it clicked shut. She stared at her screen, the raw transcript from yesterday right there. Elon's words, calm, sharp, and perfectly timed, stood out like they belonged in a textbook. She scrolled, then stopped on one part. If a court can slap endless fines on stuff that doesn't even match the gag order's exact words, then where's the line? How does it stop? That hit hard. No simple answer, and now every judge out there would be chewing on it. Across town, Musk was chilling in the back of a little cafe off Ashland Avenue, looking out the window while his assistant mumbled into a phone nearby. He wasn't throwing a party or chatting up reporters, just thinking. A woman in her late 50s walked up, holding a to-go cup. "Excuse me, sir," she said easy. "I just wanted to say, I don't know if I buy everything you said in there, but I caught it online, and it meant something. The way you carried yourself, it meant something." He looked up, caught off guard. "Thanks," he said, keeping it short and simple. She flashed a smile, gave a quick nod, and walked off. No big cheers, no hype, just a small, quiet moment. Back at the courthouse, Judge Colton pulled up a private memo from the district's legal review board. The last part hit clear. Cutting the penalty was a surprise, but it shows the court can own up to its limits when someone brings a solid case. This isn't a weak move. It's proof the system's still legit. She stared at that line for a bit, then finally let herself relax a little for the first time all day. But if one courtroom could get rattled like that, what had happened when the whole legal world started tuning in? By the next morning, it wasn't just lawyers or news junkies talking. Regular folks were in on it. Uber drivers chatted about it during rides. Barbers in Fresno and Bakersfield threw around words like gag order and whistleblower rules, like they were breaking down a big game. On a late-night AM station out of Modesto, some guy called in, "I'm not even a fan of the dude, but what he pulled off in there, that was next level." Cable news rushed to grab constitutional prose, and clips of Musk in court started blowing up online, not because he was loud or dramatic, but because he kept it so chill. No slamming fists, no yelling, just a guy calmly taking apart a fine he thought was off, and somehow that hooked people more than any TV show twist. One morning show ran a split screen, Elon's words next to Judge Colton's updated ruling. A former prosecutor shook his head on air. He played it smart, saw their moves before they even made them. The Fresno defense tags started popping up in articles. Editorial folks got nosy. How often do courts dish out fines without double-checking those exception rules? How many people just pay up because they don't have the time, cash, or guts to stand there and fight? All of a sudden, Musk wasn't just a billionaire. He turned into this sign that you could still take on the system and maybe even nudge it if you knew your stuff. Not everyone bought it, though. Over at the Department of Justice, a memo went around warning judges this could spark trouble. Sure, Musk's style was unusual, but if big names started copying him and going solo in court, things could get messy. A San Francisco columnist called it risky. "We can't hype up courtroom stunts like this, even if the guy pulling them's got billions. The law's not a playground." But others pushed back. A retired Sacramento judge wrote a piece saying, "Elon didn't mess with the law, he worked it. He showed everyone, courts included, that no setup's too big to question. That's not trouble. That's how democracy's supposed to roll." Even doubters couldn't brush it off. At a law school in downtown LA, Professor Joanna Menendez kicked off her civil procedure class by throwing Musk's transcript up on the board. "Love him or not," she told her students, "this is how you talk when you've gone over every detail twice. This is how you step into a tough spot and say, hey, you missed this." Back in Fresno, Elon stayed low-key. No media spree, no big statements. He just got back to work like nothing happened. But his team noticed people acting different around him. More curious looks, more cautious vibes at meetings. One engineer from a branch of his company asked, "Were you freaked out in there?" Musk shrugged. "Yeah, but did it show? I don't think it made a difference." Truth is, the nerves didn't stop him from standing up and talking. He didn't outsmart the court with tricks or dodge it with gaps. He played by the rules, just read them closer than anyone thought he would. And that's what stuck, not the cash, not the spotlight, but this idea that maybe knowing the game could matter as much as shaking it up. While Elon kept moving, the system he'd poked couldn't let it go. The ripples were just starting to spread. Weeks later, after the headlines faded and the cameras chased fresher stories, it still lingered, quiet but steady. Judges dropped the case into random chats, law firms tweaked their training, and profs kept sliding Musk's points into slides labeled, "When the defendant fights back." But the real kick wasn't in the big offices or courts. It was out there with regular people. It hit regular folks, like Marcus Albright, a 34-year-old mechanic from Flagstaff. He'd never cared about courtroom stuff before, but he stumbled on a YouTube clip of Elon Musk talking for 6 minutes. Just him and a sheet of paper, no attitude, no yelling. Just a dude laying out a point nobody could brush off. Marcus wasn't big on billionaires, but he watched it twice, then printed it out and took it to work. "Why'd you print that?" his coworker asked. "Because if a guy like him can step into a courtroom and speak straight without a dozen lawyers covering him, maybe I can open my mouth at the next union meeting without overthinking every word." In Sacramento, Barbara Levis, a 62-year-old retiree, filed to get an old housing code fine looked at again. She thought it got messed up. She name-dropped the Musk case to the judge, and the clerk, surprisingly, knew about it. Her appeal didn't get flipped, but they checked it out and gave her some money back. The point wasn't that Elon Musk outplayed the system. It was that the system, when hit with calm, solid reasoning, could stop, rethink, and own up to a mistake. That's what stuck. Inside the courtroom, Judge Deirdre Colton's call wasn't about liking the guy. It wasn't personal. It was just the setup. His argument added up, and once she saw it, she did her job and fixed the path. But outside those walls, it didn't feel like just paperwork. It felt bigger, like a shift where the rules weren't a one-way deal anymore. Weeks later, a podcast host threw out a straight-up question. Was this about power or smarts? The legal analyst guest took a sec, then said, "Smarts is power. It's just the chill kind. That's why this worked." Musk didn't get loud. He set a new standard. And maybe that's the takeaway. We're used to thinking sway comes with big noise or flashy moves, but this showed something else. You can still push back on the big dogs with a steady stance, clear talk, and the rules in your corner. It told folks, no matter where they're from, that knowing your stuff can beat any fancy title or backup. When you're right and you get why you're right, even a federal courtroom's got to hear you out. At the end of it, Elon didn't strut out like some champ, and he wasn't the bad guy either. He left as a guy who knew what the rules said and made sure everyone else did too. In a world where loud nonsense often buries the real stuff, maybe that kind of quiet strength is what we could use more of. So here's the deal. Don't think every system's set in stone. Don't shy away just because the room feels huge. Check every detail, stand on what you know, and speak up, Because even the slickest voices can get shut down by one person with the right words and the guts to say them. If this story got to you, made you think, or reminded you logic still counts, hit that subscribe button. We've got more coming. Stories that shake things up, spark ideas, and stick with you even after the screen's off.
This is an artistic and fictional creation intended for both entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual people or events is purely coincidental. Some scenes and dialogues in the video are part of a dramatized performance and incorporate elements of grotesque, satire, and exaggeration. The creator stands against discrimination, violence, and hatred. This channel fully complies with YouTube's policies and does not infringe upon copyright laws.